Man.
Is this better?
Hey, I think we're live. Welcome to CppChat. I don't know how many viewers we have. It tells me we have 0 viewers.
We have 2.
Oh.
Bryce is watching and I'm watching.
Okay. Do you see the showcase?
Yes.
You do?
I love cats.
Ah, so that is working. I don't know where you're seeing it, but that's great. Okay. All right. Well, do we wait for somebody to join? Oh, we now have 5 viewers, so somebody's here. So we can say, welcome to CppChat. This is a new endeavor and a new exploration. So I'm going to ask Michael to introduce himself in case there's a viewer that doesn't know who you are, Michael.
Oh, thanks. I'm Michael Caisse, and I'm the owner of Kiera Consulting. We do a variety of different C++ consulting and software consulting, training, project recovery, that type of thing. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And Bryce?
I'm Bryce Adelstein Lelbach. I work at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I develop parallel programming frameworks, and I'm a member of the C++ Standards Committee.
Ah, well, that works out really nicely because our first topic it really is what's going on in the C++ Standards Committee. You guys met, what, 2 weeks ago now, right?
That's right.
All right. In Finland, and you've put the final touches on C++ 17, or at least absent bug fixes, the final touches on C++ 17. Is that right?
Yeah, that's essentially correct. We shipped what's known as a committee draft. So the committee draft is a version of the standard that goes out to national bodies, so like the US national body, the British national body, for comments. And then once we get comments on it, we process the comments and respond to them, and then we will put out the next version of the draft, and then all the national bodies will just have an up-down vote on that. And then if that goes well, then the standard is shipped.
So Bryce, I want to know, was there some like secret to having this meeting somewhere where it's like just daylight 24/7 to make sure that you guys finish this task?
No, so the location for the meetings is determined by who volunteers to host it. And the head of the evolution working group, who's a fellow named Ville, happens to live in northern Finland, and he's the Finnish representative to WG21. So he happened to volunteer to host there. We usually do 2 meetings within the U.S. each year, and then 1 meeting that's overseas. And the reason for that is to make sure that the committee is accessible to people who live all over the globe. So if we only did the meetings in the U.S., it would be very hard for people who live in Europe, for example, because they'd have to make 3 trips over the Atlantic a year. So sometimes we end up in really cool locations like Finland.
Or Kona. I think that must be why the committee meets at Kona about every other year, because to be accessible, right?
Kona is one, but we only had 1 Hawaii meeting every 5 years, but now we're going to have 2 Hawaii meetings within about a year of each other.
Yes.
I definitely told my boss that we only met every 5 years, and I haven't told him about the next one yet. Every 5 years in Kona. And the Kona one I don't think counts as an international meeting, but Thomas Plum is the host there.
And I heard a rumor that he may be leaving there, so this may be the last Kona meeting.
I have heard that. I'm not sure about that, but that may be true.
All right. Well, let's talk about some things you are sure about. You've put up 2 different posts on what's going into 17. I think we have them on the showcase here. One is what was added in Oulu, and one is what was added in Jacksonville. So I don't think we have time to read the whole thing, but hit us some highlights and let us know what's going on and what we can expect.
Right. So I think in terms of big features, the library features are probably the largest ones. So we have a bunch of stuff from 3 different technical specs that are going to be in 17. The file system TS, the Parallelism TS, which is the Parallel Algorithms Library, and then parts of the Library Fundamentals TS. The parts of the Library Fundamentals TS that are coming in are a bunch of these vocabulary types. So I believe it's any, and then I'm not sure that there's any other big types from Library Fundamentals TS v1. But there's a whole bunch. There's all of the memory management facilities and all of the allocator facilities are coming in from Library Fundamentals TS v1. Then there's the searchers stuff, which is new, a new approach for writing search algorithms using the standard libraries algorithm. And there's a whole bunch of other things from Library Fundamentals TS v1. The Library Fundamentals TS is kind of like a container TS, and not in the sense that it has containers in it, but in the sense that it contains a bunch of things. And then there's other big library features like Variant, which was not in a TS and is just going directly into the standard. So this is a pretty substantial library features that have been added to 17. In terms of language features, most of those were added at or most of the big ones were added at the Finland meeting. So I think some of the biggest ones there are going to be inline variables, which make it substantially easier to write header-only libraries, and I think are going to have a big impact on a lot of header-only libraries. For example, in Boost, it would have a huge impact on. Structured bindings, which is a very exciting feature. It was not something that we expected to be ready for 17. And context per if is another big one. Context per if is going to make it substantially easier for us to write our template metaprogramming code. Another one that I think is actually kind of big and important, although it doesn't sound like it, is guaranteed copy illusion. The reason that this is important is because all the compilers currently do it, and the benefit of having it be guaranteed means that you don't have to write these sort of dummy members for classes that you're going to only ever copy them. They would only ever be copied in a place where you know that they're going to be elided. So it makes it easy. You can elide types that don't have their copy constructors and copy assignment operators because it's guaranteed that those illusions will happen. And there's a couple other big language features. The template argument deduction for class templates, template auto, which I think is pretty exciting, and then there's the selective if init condition and switch init condition, which is a new syntax for if and switch, which is sort of like for syntax, where you can have an initialization of some variables that will be live in the scope of the block that follows the if or the switch statement.
I'm a little confused by what you talked about there with the guaranteed illusion, because what you described doesn't match what I expected from the name. You're saying the compilers all do this now, which is to say they all do return value optimization or named return value optimization, and they also do parameter copy illusion.
Right.
But the advantage there is just that knowing that it's guaranteed, you can do things like pass in a vector knowing, well, it's not really going to be copied because it's an R-value vector. And that's nice to know that it's guaranteed. I can write portable code knowing that I don't have to worry about a vector that's a return value actually having to be copied. But what you said was something about, well, that means authors don't have to write copy constructors. Well, that sounds to me like if you don't have a copy constructor, then you can't copy. Logically, you shouldn't be able to do this at all. So what you're saying is that the illusion is allowing you to pass move-only variables in
not just move-only, but also non-movable. So let's say that you have a non-movable type, and you want to create a factory function for your non-movable type, so that the factory function returns an instance of your non-movable type. You used to not be able to do this because it was non-movable. There was no move constructor. There was no copy constructor. But now you can do this because the magic of guaranteed copy illusion.
Okay. Sounds to me like it's just going to get people in trouble. But there you go.
Jon, you look very unsettled about this whole thing.
I guess of all the things, the other question I want to ask, and this is something I actually should just know, and I don't know, and I'm thinking the answer I guess is probably no. Did Osio make it in? Do we have a networking library now?
No. So
Still in TS?
The networking TS is still being drafted. I believe. I may be wrong on this, but I believe that it is not yet at the point where it has been, where it is even out for balloting, but that it may be in the next couple meetings. So Jonathan Wakely's the editor of it. The last time I talked to him about it, he indicated that sometime in the next year, he's hoping that there would be a draft of it ready to go out for balloting, and then we would have the networking TS v1. And presumably we'll be getting some implementations for that. I suspect that libstd C++ will have an implementation that will ship. Of course, I'm not being a libstd C++ maintainer. I can't make any promises about that, but I think that's one that we'll see some deployment experience with.
Well, and I think probably just in time, because I think people are likely to start writing networking code just any day now. So
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But that was certainly not something that was in the 17 time frame for a while. It will probably be in the time frame of CPP next, which would be the next standard. That's probably going to be C++ 20.
Hey Bryce, are you able to talk about the variant and why we just skipped TS, moved directly into the language?
I can speak a little bit to that. So I should say I was a no on variant for 17 out of Jacksonville, but I was yes on it going into Oulu. I think the reason it didn't go into the TS was that there was a design. There are two separate reference implementations of the design. And we're still trying to figure out what things need to go into a TS versus what things can just go into the library. So if variant had been something that we'd started working on right after 14, it probably would have gone into the library fundamentals TS. But just given the time frame, like it was probably going to be ready for 17. It wasn't a huge feature like something like file system or networking. Obviously, that's not just one vocabulary type. It's a whole big thing, and that probably is exactly what you want a TS for. But it's unclear whether something like variant needs to go into a TS. And TSs are new. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is the requirement for something to go into a TS and then the standard versus just going directly into the standard. So I guess the short answer is it's I don't want to say it's almost arbitrary, but it's sort of a you know it when you see it sort of thing.
Okay.
And we don't really have a principled methodology that that is deterministic for figuring out whether something goes into a TS versus right into the standard.
Okay,
well,
so
there are a lot of people who are happy about variant going into 17, so don't get the wrong impression here. We're just wondering,
yeah.
TS, not TS.
I was intending on being opposed to it going into 17 after Jacksonville for both a technical reason, which is concerns about the valueless by exception state, and also because I was unsure whether it was the right thing to do to put it into the TS because of the question of, well, maybe it should have been in a TS before it goes into the IS. But David Sankel and other factors changed my mind, so I'm happy with it in, and we didn't actually vote on it. It got in by unanimous consent, which was a very odd thing. That's very rare that a big feature like that goes in by unanimous consent.
Well, I think everybody's going to recognize its value and utility, but the question that I have about it, and I don't know where we ultimately came down on this, but it's something you just alluded to. Speaking of David, he brought it out in his talk at C++ Now, and I don't think the video for that talk is online yet. But when it is, I would encourage people to take a look at Sankel's talk on variant, or you could just drop by Bellevue in September, because I think he's doing the same talk again. It's probably going to be updated because of Oulu. But what he brought out is this, what was it called? Invalid by exception, or whatever the...
valueless by exception is the name we picked.
And that's one of the things he pointed out. And Dave, because he was in the audience, also talked about this. And he said in C++, we end up wrapping ourselves around this really, really rare and almost hypothetical situation. But it pervades the entire design. And in practice, this valueless by exception is just never going to happen. And yet everybody's going to have to write code to deal with the valueless by exception situation. It's a theoretical situation. And so a design where that just wasn't part of the design, as difficult as it might be in some cases, but figuring out how to make variant work that way, which somehow Boost did. I don't think Boost had valueless by design, or by exception.
Yeah, that's correct. It didn't. The Boost variant did the double buffering thing. My concern with valueless by exception was that if you were always able to construct the valueless by exception state for any variant, then somebody was going to write the Boost utility function that did that by throwing an exception, and then you would end up with a variant that has this invalid state always, but that it's sort of hidden, and the only way to get to it involves control flow that must use exception handling. But because that's not the case, for example, variant int float, there's no way to get to that state. I'm pretty comfortable that nobody's going to try to abuse it that way, and I think I'm also sort of sold that we don't need an invalid state for the variant.
Okay. I would point out also that in addition to the articles that you've put on Reddit, that Herb did a kind of nice trip report. Of course, he was focusing on Oulu. I don't think he was talking about all of 17, right?
But both Jens Weller and Michael Wong put blog posts out that have pretty comprehensive lists of the 17 feature set.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to have to go through there because I suspect Michael's going to be doing this too. We have some courseware to produce, or at least update, I should say.
Yeah, this is really the best part about getting new standards constantly now, or is there's like new stuff to teach. It's wonderful. People are excited about it too, so that's really nice.
One of the things that, and this is something that I just mentioned this to Bryce the other day, which is that all of us, right, and probably all the people watching us, and certainly us, and the people who go to the committee, we're all excited about 17. But the vast majority of C++ users are still grappling with some of the features in 11, and many programmers are still locked into classic C++.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you are hanging with a really cool crowd because so many of my clients are still on 98.
So there were some questions in chat about visitation patterns for variant. So we don't really have we'll have ways to extend that in the future. Right now you have to write a visitor class, but there's one really cool thing you can do that it's not in 17, but hopefully it'll be in 20, which is there's this proposed feature called overload, which takes a bunch of functions and forms an overload set from those functions. So what you can do with this is you can say, I want to visit my variant, overload, and then you give it a bunch of lambdas. And then it will create the function object from those lambdas, and then it's a very nice and elegant way to write a visitation function in place. And also, people are looking at other pattern matching approaches. David Sankel brought a paper about language features for pattern matching and language-supported variants. So that's a direction that we'll extend in the future.
Alrighty. So there was this kind of rather intense backlash after Jacksonville about what was not going to be in 17, which turned out to be a lot of stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff not in 17. There's a lot of cool stuff in 17, but there's a lot of cool stuff not in 17. And some people were really upset about that. I think I made my position clear. I think I tweeted I would rather see a perfectly good feature wasting time in a TS than to see a feature that's not ready that gets rolled into the standard. And so I'm a kind of patient person when the downside is something that we're going to be stuck with forever, like vector bool or something like that.
Well, John, you have to be patient. We've been programming in C++ for 25 years, so it's taken a lot to get to 17.
That's right. That's right. But is the feeling changing now? I mean, is there less of this? I mean, have expectations been lowered enough, and then we got some kind of last-minute things we weren't expecting in 17? Are people happy now, or is there still?
I think some people are happy and some people are unhappy. It's really hard to say. I think Oulu went better than I expected, and we got more features in than I expected. So I think that has made people happy, and I think when you look at the total feature set for 17, it's larger than the suggested very minor release after Jacksonville. But I think a lot of people felt that the feature set after Jacksonville was fine and that it was going to be fine. I'm not sure how many minds changed. Some number did, but I don't know. The people will express this to us in some way.
I got to be really careful about exactly how I phrase this, but I'm enjoying the fact that we've decided not to post the recording of this session. But a particular individual who's prominent on the standards committee and is also going to be speaking at CppCon was talking about what they were going to talk about, and so I said, well, you should obviously speak about all the stuff that's new in C++ 17. And he said, yeah, but what am I going to talk about for the other 88 minutes? He's not too pleased, I think. But
if we're talking about the same person, and I know we are because it's one or two people, I believe that he felt slightly better about things after Oulu. I think the quote was, it wasn't as much as I wanted, but it was more than I thought that would go in.
You guys are trying to get me in trouble, aren't you?
You're trying to get me in trouble.
I'm just being quiet.
All right. I will say I'm excited. And one of the things that I think, you know, I had this conversation with somebody and said, well, we may have been talking about the fact that there was a proposal, which I think is dead now, but there was a proposal to go to 2-year releases instead of 3-year releases. And someone said, well, something about, well, we could get more something. And I want to make the argument that what the committee is doing is constant, that how frequently the releases are is a question, but the committee is not wasting its time. And if you look at the 13 years between 98 and C++11, what you see is 13 years worth of a lot of stuff. Now, yes, concepts went in and came out, and it was a waste of a lot of time. But look at all the stuff that's different between 98 and 11. And, you know, when we look at 14 and even 17, say, well, there's not that much in there. Well, no, not compared to 13 years, but it is 3 years worth. And we have TSs. So one of the things that Herb has pointed out is we may see a release that's got just everything in it. Well, it's just because of the timing of all those TSs coming in. And I just, the way I look at it is the committee's working. They're not wasting their time. And in the next 3 years, we're going to get 3 years worth of good, solid committee work. And when 20 ships, is it going to have a lot of stuff, or is everything going to be stuck in TSs? Well, we won't know. But I don't want anything coming out of a TS before it's ready. And if we get a particular release that's not too exciting, like maybe 14 wasn't a whole lot of stuff, I'm okay with that because I don't think time's wasted, and I want to see features come in when they're ready to come in.
So two comments on that. One, I think I believe the idea of a 2-year cycle is largely dead at this point. We had been considering a 2-year cycle. Some people even wanted a 1-year cycle. unfortunately, because of the ISO process, it would, like, shipping a standard is more work than just putting stuff into the document and shipping it. It takes a couple meetings. I think the 3-year cycle, the 2-year cycle may have threatened our ability to do work, because the working draft would be locked for basically every other year, and we would have to spend a lot more meetings doing ballot processing. Now, arguably, they might be smaller releases, so thus less time doing ballot processing. But I think for now, we're sticking with the 3-year cycle. And the second comment is that TSs are, I think, again, there's something that we're still trying to figure out how to use, and I believe they're useful. However, one thing we've learned about TSs is that TSs are not a way to get user experience. You can only rely on a TS to get implementation experience. Thus far, we've not gotten a lot of user experience from TSs because they're experimental, they're beta features.
Yeah, so here's some advice. If you put it inside of a include other than experimental, because when I give clients code and they review it and they see like include of experimental / something, they kind of go weird about that. That's just maybe come up with a friendlier name.
Right. I think one of the things that's a misconception, and it's something that I've spoken about, which is that we refer to these TSs, or at least Herb is trying to refer to, and trying to get people to think of them as beta, so that it makes it seem like the standards committee is not wasting its time by giving you, well, hey, here's this beta software. But the important thing to realize is there's nothing that says the library is beta. The quality of the library is not beta. It's the interface that may change. And so there's no reason for you to say, well, we couldn't possibly ship our production code using this experimental software. Well, that would be true if you were worried about the quality of the implementation. But there's nothing that promises you, when 17 comes out, there's going to be these different implementations of library features, and it's quite possible that those implementations aren't very strong, even though they're in the standard. I mean, the quality of the implementation doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it's a TS or it's in the standard. And so I think Michael's got a good point there. Putting it in experimental scares people away, because it doesn't sound like what it really is. It sounds like the library is experimental, and really what's experimental is just the interface. And that's, I think, it's going to make it harder to get user results. The other thing I would say is that you can get implementer results a lot faster. If you want to get user results, which I do, you're going to have to be even more patient. I mean, it may take a couple of meetings to get the implementers to finish implementing the library, but it's going to take a couple of years to get users, because just using it isn't really the experience you want. Well, you want implementers to use it and get it in the hands of real human users, and then they can report back and say, particularly if the library is something like a networking library or a multi-threading library where some of these performance issues may not be obvious initially, and you have to play with it a while.
So I have to disagree, because the thing that's experimental is the interface. When the standard is not an implementation, but it is a spec, and the library in particular is speccing an interface. And the reason that it's an experimental is because stuff in a TS, we make no guarantees that we won't make breaking ABI changes, like massive breaking interface changes. And so the reason that we call them betas, and the reason that things live in experimental, is because we want users to be aware that we make no guarantees that we won't change this interface out from under you, and that we won't maybe change it multiple times. So that's the balancing act here.
Boost has the same situation. We don't break things often, but we don't ever make the guarantee we won't. And I think people using a TS have to know, hey, we're using a TS, and they have to understand the difference. But they don't have to panic over it. The problem with breaking software is some company that's got some application that nobody's touched in 10 years and it just works, and you're now coming along and saying, oh, we're going to break that. That's scary. But if you've got a project that's under development and somebody says, oh, by the way, we've got some changes to the API of these libraries, okay, somebody's going to have to do some changing. And that was a risk that they knew going in. I don't know. I don't think we need to terrify people over the possibility.
I
like what calling it staging instead of experimental.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'll put it in my notes.
I'm not sure staging's the greatest term either, but the point is something that's less scary than, experimental makes it sound like, I don't want my production code to be under experimental. I have greater value of my customers than that.
Right, yeah.
That's not what we're saying.
We have an example, just like a couple months ago, we were using experimental optional, and in the first code review, people were like, whoa, what is this experimental optional? I'm like, okay, fine, we'll use boost optional. Solved.
Well, so the experimental namespace is one of these things that is not, I believe, not a written rule. I would strongly suspect that it is just something that exists because of precedent. So, and I say that because it's very hard to make a rule like saying all TSs must use experimental.
All right, now all three viewers are Googling whether or not experimental is a real thing or not.
Well, so the analogy is when we were talking about feature test macros for TSs at Kona, that was something that we were talking about, but there was no way for us to standardize in a normative way saying that all TSs shall use feature testing macros. And so likewise, I'm pretty sure there's nothing normative that says that all TSs must live in experimental. So if you wanted to change this, you could arguably the best way would be write a TS, get it, get interest in it, and then don't put your stuff in experimental, put it in some other namespace.
Well, the problem here is that I think there's at least one member of the standards committee, it's someone who's on this group, who just said that TSs are never going to be useful for user feedback. And I think, given that attitude, if that's your attitude going in and your expectation, well, there's no run. You might as well call it, Nazi namespace from hell. It doesn't matter because you're never going to get users to use it if that's your attitude going in. But you have to have the attitude that it would really be possible and certainly would be good if it could happen for users to give us some feedback. And
I was just referring to the facts on the ground. Up until now, our experience has been that TSs are a good way to get implementation experience and to verify the spec, but we have had the idea that TSs are going to get a ton of user experience. We haven't seen that thus far. I'm not saying that this is good or correct. I'm just speaking to the facts on the ground that thus far TSs have not gotten us a lot of user feedback.
Well, and frankly, I would never expect it to be. It's never going to be mainstream. I don't think we want it to be mainstream. What we want is a few cutting-edge users like Michael and his company, and a few other people who are willing to deploy it and give us some feedback. And they're not going to be in the mainstream. And I don't think the mainstream. If we this kind of our problem is we're going directly from the committee to the mainstream, and I think we could do better. I think we could deploy it by a few people who are making an informed decision about what a TS is and are interested in it because it's an area that they're interested in and want to take a chance on deploying it and understand the trade-offs, and then are in a position to give us some valuable feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe more people are using experimental stuff than we know about, but we don't get the user feedback that had been expected or hoped for.
Well,
what is the mechanism, Bryce? Like, if I wanted to provide feedback, do I have to write a paper to provide that feedback?
It is an arcane process because all ISO processes are arcane.
We don't have time, right? People who are writing code for a living, they don't have time to go through some arcane process that ISO or the committee wants. If you want feedback, you actually have to set up a system where you can get feedback on experimental libraries. It's just kind of how it has to work, right? Maybe consider like a tracking system or something where it's accessible to the public and not just committee members, or some type of mechanism that allows the public who you would like to use the experimental libraries and provide feedback to provide feedback. But we're not going to write papers. We don't have time to write papers. We're actually writing real code for like real companies to make real money.
You don't have to write papers, but there is a standing document that describes the current process. We're trying to improve these things.
Let's just say it's wrong. Whatever it is, it's probably wrong.
I agree. Look. it took me like there's a lot of undocumented stuff that you have to learn when you join the committee, and it's almost shocking that a technology standardization committee doesn't have necessarily the most modern process, but I think we're making efforts to improve that.
So here's a question: What does the committee expect to happen with the TS? What is the outcome that they would like to have? Right? Do they want it just to be a place for implementation to occur, for implementers to play with interfaces and try to get an idea of it, or are they really wanting feedback, or is it just to placate the process in order to try to get things to move more quickly along and have things to be able to be staged, and it is a mechanism within inside of the committee to get work moving, which is perfectly valid, right?
I think I'm gonna say as politically correct of an answer as I can.
Oh, come on, it's not being recorded.
We're still learning. We're still learning what a TS means and what we expect out of it. It means different things. It has different expectations for different people.
So nobody
John,
knows what it means.
Yeah, John, can you maybe try to put I just put a link in the chat. Can you try to put that on the showcase? It's the link to how you submit issues against the standard. It took me like 3 months to find, so I think it's a useful thing to advertise to people.
I think I put the link up, but now I don't. Hang on, let's try one more time.
I just
Are there 2 links here? There's 2 links.
Yeah, but I just added a third one, which is the link to the standing document for.
Okay.
And I agree. You shouldn't have to go through something like that. It is a little bit of a. I think you have to send a mail to somebody.
I think part of the issue also is that here we go. The committee is also, you're saying that programmers don't have time. I think also the committee doesn't have time in the sense that they're not willing to wait. If you told them, hey, we've got this TS, we've edited it, we're ready to propose it into the standard, and we're going to wait for 3 meetings for user feedback, I think that most committees are going to say, I mean, everybody's in a hurry. I will also share, again, I won't name the particular source of this, but one prominent member of the committee, when I spoke to them, again, also frustrated by the fact that TSs were not being voted into the standard, I said, well, the point of TSs is to get some experience with the features before they go in. And what he told me was, no. The point of TSs is to give something for cowards to be able to vote for.
Yeah, that's. I strongly disagree with that sentiment, and I think it's out of line to make comments like that.
But that's think okay. If you think about it, if it's being utilized as that, then that's a staging process for this thing that's moving along to get some maturity, and it sits inside of a TS, it gets a little more maturity, and then it's easier to vote on. And if that's the purpose of it, then that's great. But it sounds like actually the committee doesn't know what TSs are for. But they just created something called a TS.
It is completely untrue, though. The claims that TSs are being used as a political tool to prevent certain features from getting into the standard is I think completely untrue, and it's a harmful idea to be spread around, and I really wish that we could raise the level of discourse past that. It's unfortunate that some people feel that way and feel feel it's necessary to tell people that they feel that way. I think we have a general idea of what TSs are. Some people have different expectations for what to get out of a TS, but it's not that we're completely clueless. We are still learning how we're going to use them and how they're going to fit into our process. I think any organization, when you make a large change to how you function, it's going to take time for you to figure out, well, what are the implications of that change, and people are going to think that this new way of working maybe has different pros and cons, or you're expecting different things out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, none of us have conspiracy theories. In fact, I'm going to come over here and get my foil hat from the lab bench one moment. Actually, all I can find is an ESD bag, but I think the ESD bag might work.
I mean, you guys, I know, of course, wouldn't have such theories, but some people who are not in this chat right now do feel that way, and it's very troubling to me.
Nice, John.
I'm wearing my tinfoil hat now.
That's a very fancy tinfoil hat.
Well, there you go.
For the record, when we did the test of this last night, both of them had ridiculous effects like the entire time. It was hard to keep a straight face.
It was
Bryce,
only because people say things like, you got to keep an eye on that, Bryce. You got to keep an eye on it.
All right. So I think we've kind of chewed a little bit on 17, and I don't think we're going to cover everything there is to cover. But let's move on. One thing I wanted to talk about is we kind of want to recap the things going on in C++ over the week. And one thing that happened is that CppCast had an interview with Elias, what's his name? Elias Dollar. And he did some game development stuff and talks about using C++ and Lua together. And I think the idea there is that a lot of the game logic is in Lua, but the heavy lifting of the performance stuff is in C++. So I always enjoy listening to the interviews, although this particular one didn't have really a lot of stuff for me because I'm not into game development in Lua, but I still followed it. It was still interesting.
Yeah, it's actually on my docket to listen to today as I paint walls. Doesn't that sound like fun? Sounds like fun.
All right. So the next topic, where's the showcase for this? CppCon, which is something that all three of us have been working on, and I'm very happy to share this tidbit that our early bird deadline has passed. And the early bird deadline, we moved it up a little bit, so relative to previous years, it's earlier in the year. Nonetheless, we had astounding growth, and I mean that literally, that I was astounded by the level of growth that we had. The growth last year from the previous year was 10% for the early bird deadline, and this year it was just under 38%, which I was delighted and excited to see. Like I say, very happy about that. What else is going on? We also have an awful lot of interest in exhibitors. We had exhibitors for the first time last time. We had, other than the bookstore, we had 3 exhibitors. This year I think we have like 7 already signed up. Maybe it's 6 only, and then there's at least 2 more that are very serious and likely to come on board with that. So fortunately, I think we have room for them all. We may put some of the exhibitors down on the 2nd floor instead of having them all up on the 4th floor.
I think Bryce was going to actually exhibit a new TS review and submission process or something of that sort. Was that right, Bryce?
No comment.
No. I'll sponsor the booth for you. Feedback mechanisms.
Well, what I was going to say is you could get a poster on what the feedback mechanism is. We are accepting posters this year, and the early deadline for posters has passed, and we only got 2 posters in the early deadline, which was about what we expect. I don't expect to get a lot of posters initially, and maybe never will have a lot. But both of the submissions, they look very interesting. They put a lot of work into just the submission, so I'm kind of excited about what we're going to see. I don't think, like I said, I don't think there'll be many posters, but I think they'll be interesting, and I'm looking forward to Bryce's on the submission, on the feedback submission process.
I was planning on doing a poster, but a different poster, but who knows, maybe.
Maybe this one. Hey, John, until Hanya brought it up last year, I didn't really know what this poster thing was. Perhaps you could just like give a mention here. What are these posters?
Oh, no. The person who do this is Bryce. This is an academic thing. I've never been at a conference. Well, that's not entirely true. I think Apple, when I went to WWDC, they had posters.
Okay, a WWDC, not an academic conference.
No, but they had posters. So, but you could probably do a better justice of what to expect of the posters.
Posters are a useful tool at academic conferences because You can convince your grad students to do a poster because they don't feel intimidated about having to go up and talk in front of people. No, but posters get used in academic conferences. There's a number of benefits to them. Mostly it's that your posters are an asynchronous form of presenting. Your poster can be up there while you're not around. You don't have to be there to present your poster. People can go walk through and read your poster without you there, so they don't just have to like go and find. If they're interested in your talk, but you're only talking like a 20-minute window, and they're not there for that, well, that sucks. But if there's a poster, they can go read the poster. So yeah, they get used a lot at conferences. It's pretty typical thing. Usually you have like some amount of text, but you're usually very visually driven. So you're trying to tell a story somehow and draw people in with graphics and visual displays, stuff like that.
So this is something that I've had some difficulty imagining what exactly is going to be visual for a programming language conference. So I'm anxious to see it. I could certainly see visual representations of performance, other kinds of things, but we'll see. And I suspect when people will be creative and it's going to be fun to do. So I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah. And
the other thing I want to say is that we have we have sent out. This isn't new news. It looks like several of the people who are in the chat room know that we've already sent out acceptances and non-acceptances. I always try to avoid using the word rejection because it sounds so terrible. But we have notified those whose submissions we've accepted for CppCon and those whose submissions we're not accepting. And the schedule says that we're going to have an online schedule tomorrow. And that is still not out of the question, but it is also possible that it won't be tomorrow because it depends on how much sleep I want to get tonight. But I do want to vent a little bit about the PC process. Bryce said I couldn't do this, but I'm going to vent anyway. I posted something on Reddit, and it was actually about something else, but because it mentioned CppCon, someone on Reddit made this comment about how the PC needs to do a better job because this particular individual went to a session and it sounded like, the way he described it, someone got up and said, oh, by the way, this whole thing that you're trying to discuss has been solved in some way and all you have to do is do this. And it kind of destroyed the whole talk because it made it all moot. I suspect that was something of an exaggeration, but then he went on and generalized and says, the program committee needs to do a better job of filtering all these things out. And I took that as an opportunity, and I replied, and I said, well, I'm really glad that you're interested in the program committee. Here's the link to what we do and how you can join. And, of course, his response was, well, I want to attend the conference. I don't want to organize it.
Yeah,
well, okay, that's fine. That's fair. But on the other hand, what you're really saying is that you don't have time to fix the problem, but you think it's a problem important enough for somebody else to fix.
Well, I think, John, what was interesting to me is that they put together this concept of, I think the quote is, I would rather attend the conference than organize it, hence why I pay the registration fee, flights, and accommodation. And as if somehow the program committee is reimbursed for all of the time that they put in, and perhaps he just doesn't understand. It's a volunteer effort in order to make this thing work, and is that you don't get to like just pay some money and show up and have nothing,
Well, you do.
You can, but you should also be involved in trying to make the program better if you want it that way.
That's right. That's right. If you want to improve it, then you should think about putting some time in. And what was interesting was, having said that, then this particular individual went on and described the entire process of how it should be done, which was basically doing pretty much what the program committee does, except doing it by letting anybody in the community instead of restricting it just to the program committee. And as a practical matter, I think that's just completely unworkable. How do you decide who gets to vote? I mean, in the program committee, we don't really screen very tightly. We want to make certain that anybody on the program committee has some non-trivial amount of C++ experience. And that's not a terribly high bar. But one of the things that, because they're on the program committee, we know exactly who everybody is. So you only get one vote. But if you tried to open it up to, quote unquote, the community, then somebody could say, oh, I'm going to get, you know, my entire family to vote that I should present at this conference, and we wouldn't have any way of knowing that.
That is a great idea.
Grandma Ruby is or is not actually a C++ programmer. How would we know not to let her vote? And then the other thing is, here's this guy who's saying he doesn't have time to review the 15 submissions that he would be asked to review as a program committee member, but he was hoping to vote on 200 submissions. It's just, okay. So I vented now. I tried to respond to, I started to respond to him on Reddit, and then I realized, you know, this is a Cody McCodeface.
Go Ben Dean, yes. Ben has a new alias.
Right. Anyway, so now that I've vented, I can put this behind me and not worry about him anymore. So the schedule is supposed to be on tomorrow. There's lots of, we did a much more aggressive job this year of reaching out to speakers and asking for them to tell us about how we could improve the schedule. So in the past, I've kind of just said to speakers, by the way, if you have conflicts, let us know. And what always happens is that we get lots of people after the schedule goes up saying, oh, wait, I can't speak on Tuesday. And that's, you know, if somebody doesn't want to speak on Tuesday, it's absolutely fine. We can completely deal with that. But once the schedule's up, now we not only have to change you, we have to change somebody else who we're moving to swap you with them, and then we have to notify them because they may not even know. They may have checked the schedule and said, oh, I'm speaking on Tuesday, and then find out later, no, they've been swapped and they're now on Thursday. And you know, so the other thing we did was sent everybody who has been accepted a list of all the other sessions that have been accepted so that we can get some feedback from them on who they should not be scheduled with or opposite.
I turned mine in. I basically said I don't want to be scheduled same time as Senkel or Andre. Beyond that, it just doesn't really matter.
I appreciate that. We're going to put you between Herb and Scott Myers.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what else do we want to talk about? We got, and I really wish I could share this. We got I think a pretty good item to go into the swag bag for everybody, and I'm excited about that. What else is going on in the conference?
Love it. Leave it at that.
We need to get people to. I've been looking over the hotel blocks, and we are nicely situated with all the hotel blocks except the Hyatt, which is our largest block. So that's something we need to start. I'm going to send out NAG letters and let everybody know, hey, please get your hotel reservations. And I've just been reminded, thank you, Bryce, that I should talk about classes. So we have 6. And our runaway bestseller by far is the low latency class, which I thought might be popular, but wow, it's very popular. The one I expected to be most popular is Anthony Williams' concurrency class. Anthony has never spoken in the United States before, so this is a rare opportunity for us to hear him present. And of course, Anthony is quite the authority on things in multi-threading in the standard. So I was expecting it to be popular, and it is. It's the second most popular of the class. And then I think, I can't remember right now whether Michael's modernization class or Dan Sachs's embedded class is next. They're both doing well. The other classes, what's left?
Guidelines.
Kate's guideline class and the Qt class by Giuseppe are not doing as well, which is a little disappointing. But I think I don't think that attendance is going to affect those classes. In other words, I don't think we're going to cancel them for attendance. But the total number of people who have asked for classes, we're only at early bird, and I think the total number is on the order of 100 or something like that. I think I probably wrote that down somewhere. I'm not absolutely certain. I should have.
It's a little bit over 100.
Yeah, something like that. And that's good. Michael's class we thought was excellent last time, and we had 50. Was it 50 paid students or 50 paid attendees? I think we had 70 people in the class, but a lot of those were volunteers because we opened it to volunteers.
Right.
But there's clearly some growth because this is, as I said, only the early bird time, and we're already at about double in terms of paid. Of course, we have 6 classes. So anyway, there's
134 people signed up for classes.
Oh, so it's even more than yeah. So yeah, and then of course, as I said, we've got a long way to go in terms of registrations. So we're more than halfway. Generally, we have more than 50% are early bird registrations. Although we did, as I said, move early bird earlier, so it's possible that we'll get even more registrations than we normally are. So we were just a little over 50% last year. So it's hard to anticipate, but I think we're going to get a large number of people coming to the conference in order to attend, or part of their conference experience is going to be attending classes, and I think that's great. I think people will get more out of the conference with the mixture of formal instruction and the more traditional presentation style things. Anyway, so I hope you guys have enjoyed the chat. I'm going to wind it down. We wanted to go over, talk about Sean's interview, which I enjoyed a lot, but then I always enjoy listening to Sean. And then we were going to go over to some things on Reddit, and that's kind of the format we're going to have. But I think this year, or this week anyway, because we had so much stuff to talk about 17, that we'll probably talk some more about 17 anyway next week. But thank you guys all for joining us. Please give us some feedback about what you liked or didn't like. We obviously have a lot to learn about how to do this, and but it's been fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Give us ideas about what we should talk about and topics and things like that. So I guess we're going to sign off. Anything else?
Happy coding.
Happy coding.
Happy coding.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Ciao.
And talk to you all later. We're going off the air.